I actually think about the UK Conservative Party and use that as a reflection. People said Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak will follow. He's more competent than Liz Truss, so therefore that must be dangerous for the Labour Party. In actual fact, it hasn't transpired that way. He might sound more competent, he may be more competent, but what people have already made their minds up. They think it's a chaotic and dysfunctional UK Tory government, and they can see he is just a veneer that covers a divided and chaotic and dysfunctional political party underneath. I think that veneer is now John Swinney with the SNP. He might want to pretend he gives a more stable approach in terms of the language he uses, the way he carries himself, but underneath that, there is still that chaotic, divided, dysfunctional SNP. He still has the baggage of 17 years of failure, and I think the more the Scottish people look at his record and what that has meant for them in practice, and now when they look at his delivery directly as First Minister, they will see this as just a more of the same cabinet. It is a continuity cabinet. In actual fact, the only thing that's changed is that Kate Forbes has been brought in. Every single other cabinet member has kept their same job, and the very same people that failed our public services are now expecting us to believe them that they're now the ones that are going to fix it. So I don't buy the argument, and I look forward, both in the general election and in the next Scottish Parliament election, to take on John Swinney, to take on the SNP, and to win the argument, and to rebuild trust with the Scottish people, and to win those elections. On the Scottish Greens comments about Kate Forbes, I think undoubtedly there is a language shift and perhaps a positioning shift from the SNP that has shifted it more to the right than what was there previously. Look, I've got lots of criticisms of Nicola Sturgeon, I have lots of criticisms of her record, but no one can argue that she was a social policy-led First Minister. I don't think we're going to get that with this current leadership, and neither do I think they have the credible economic plan that's going to give us the growth that we need to deliver. And so there's undoubtedly been a shift. I think the question, though, that should be asked is to the SNP, because the SNP can't pretend to be all things to all people anymore. It's done it for a very, very long time, but I think they're now being found out. And I want to know where that progressive majority that apparently exists in the SNP now views its current policy position. So people should be asking, is this SNP new leadership, do they still support workers paying higher taxes than the other parts of the UK? Do they still support increasing taxes on nurses, but lowering taxes on the oil and gas giants, making record profits? Do they still support taking money away from local government and decimating local services? Because I've heard a lot about the personality changes. I've heard nothing about what they're actually going to do to fix our NHS. I've heard nothing about what they're going to do to fix broken local government. I've heard nothing about what they're going to do to fix our education system. I've heard nothing meaningful about how they're going to work with businesses to grow our economy. It's all about managing the political party, nothing to do with running the country. We, the Labour Party, are now putting country first, changing our party so we can change our country. The first thing I'd say is that there is something galling about a political party and a First Minister that was the architect of divisive politics, who made it an art form to shout down and clamp down opposition and to attack publicly and privately opposition political parties, to now pretend he is the great unifier of our nation. The reality is John Swinney has been at the heart of every SNP failure for the last 17 years. He's been at the heart of the SNP political leadership for the last 40 years. So he's right, we need a new kind of politics. He's right, we need constructive politics. He's right, we need to have a parliament of minorities that respects across the chamber. But the harsh reality is, it can't come from him. He's had his chance, he's had his opportunity, and after 17 years, Scotland has paid the price. So we need fresh leadership, we need new ideas, we need change, and that can only come with the Scottish Labour government in 2026. On the growth question, look, again, if you look at our economy, we're lagging behind other parts of the UK. A good comparison actually for us is if you look at what's happening in Greater Manchester. Greater Manchester has fewer powers and fewer economic levers than we have in Scotland, but it is using the levers, the limited levers it has, to outstrip almost every other part of the country in terms of inward investment and growth. Just imagine we had a government here in Scotland that was willing to use the levers, for example, around our skills system, around our rate system, around our tax system, around decluttering the economic landscape. Imagine what more we could do if I had a coordinated plan to grow Scotland's economy and a central strategic plan to deliver economic growth. and then use the fruits of that economic growth to deliver for every part of our nation. Instead, what we have is government by press release and government by announcement. A bit of money put here for a nice photo op and a press release, a bit of money put here with no coherent strategy. That is fundamentally going to change. We will put an economic directorate at the heart of the office of First Minister. We will have an overarching economic growth plan that covers every part of government, and we will make sure that economic growth becomes our #1 priority, and then using the fruits of that economic growth to reform our public services, in particular our NHS, and then using the fruits of that growth to bring down the tax burden on working people right across Scotland. And again, that change only comes if people vote for it, and I'm desperate for those elections, as you can tell from my comments in the last few weeks and today. On Natalie Elphicke, look, I don't know Natalie Elphicke. I've never met Natalie Elphicke. Lots of her comments I find completely unacceptable. But what I do agree with her on, is that Rishi Sunak's time is up, that we have a chaotic and divided Conservative Party that must be booted out of office, and that we need a Labour government. But the person I'll be supporting is Mike Tapp, who's the Labour candidate in Dover and Deal, who will be a fantastic Labour MP and one of very many that helps us deliver a UK Labour government and Keir Starmer as Prime Minister.
Thanks, Anas. Can I get your thoughts on the conversion therapy ban? You have the Greens saying that they won't support it if it's not watertight, but John Swinney this morning saying he's going to reflect on some of the concerns raised by some of the campaign groups and by Dr Hilary Cass. Where are Labour on this? Would you support the government here? And secondly, can I ask, are you having any conversations with any Tory MSPs about possible defections? Would you accept any Tory MSP into the group?
Well, I can clamp down the second part of the question. There are no discussions with Tory MSPs, although I can imagine a lot of Tory MSPs will view this current Conservative Party as being completely alien to the Ruth Davison Scottish Conservatives that was in place a while ago. So if any of them are thinking of jumping ship, they should come out and just say, first of all, that the dysfunctional Tory government should go and people should vote Labour across the country. I think that would be the starting point. On the important question you asked about conversion therapy, obviously that has been a manifesto commitment of ours. It continues to be something that we are committed to. But I think there are lessons that have to be learned. And one of the things I would challenge the SNP leadership on is they can no longer take the goodwill of the public and the goodwill of the Parliament and then turn that into incompetent delivery of policy which actually undermines the cause of progressive values and undermines the cause of social justice. So we will look at any piece of legislation that comes before the Parliament. We will scrutinise it based on its merits, but we need confidence that what the government actually promises in the Parliament is actually then what is implemented and delivered for people across the country. Because what happens when it doesn't happen? Let's take two examples, the GRR bill and the hate crime bill. On the GRR bill, since its passing, the trans community feel no more protected and women feel no more reassured. And on the hate crime bill, because of the chaotic implementation of the hate crime bill, you actually have police saying they're now not able to investigate crimes in a way that they should have been able to, and you have, I think, a disconnect where you have to try and challenge prejudice and hate. And I've always viewed that the best route of challenging prejudice and hate is actually through our education system rather than our criminal justice system. So two examples where they took the goodwill of the Parliament, the good intentions of the Parliament, but they then do not implement on those good intentions and that goodwill. They cannot make that mistake with legislation going forward because that undermines the cause of social justice, undermines the cause of progressive politics.
Thanks, Anas. There's been a bit of attention lately over the fact that a number of Labour candidates in Scotland are based nowhere near the constituencies they're running in. Is there a kind of dearth of local talent for Labour at the moment to run in these areas? And are you confident that, for example, someone based in Canterbury can effectively represent Angus, or that somebody based in Edinburgh can effectively represent Orkney and Shetland?
Well, first of all, Edinburgh is in Scotland, so I'm happy to give that clarification around people standing in Scottish constituencies and Scottish seats. But look, there's a wider point here, which is there are people who have connections and ties to Scotland who want to come and serve the Scottish people. And I am not going to turn my back on someone that has a love for Scotland, a story about Scotland, or a connection in Scotland that wants to deliver for the people of Scotland. And look, I actually use Mel Ward as a really good example, who's just been elected in the seat in Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath, a Scot that is actually impacting change for one of the hardest hit parts of the world right now. As Chief Executive of Medical Aid for Palestinians, she is spending every minute of every day trying to get life-saving supplies into the Gaza Strip to save people's lives, to get them the necessary treatments they need because of a completely broken health system, and trying to argue the case of trying to end violence and bring about lasting peace. Nobody can tell me she is not a phenomenal candidate standing in a Scottish seat who would be a great champion for the Scottish Labour Party and deliver change for the Scottish people, whilst also celebrating Labour's internationalism to defeat poverty and injustice right around the world. So I'm proud of our candidates. We're brimming with talent, we're brimming with confidence, and I can't wait to elect a whole host of new Scottish Labour MPs and a whole host of new Scottish Labour MSPs in government delivering for the Scottish people.